calling 3-bets with a plan. The spot, very easy. We are talking about in position. So we're not talking about calling 3-bets out of position today. So what happens is we do raise first in and someone out of the blinds 3-bets us. And what happens next is that we decide against the fold, that we decide against the 4-bet. We do make the call and see a flop in position. Let's start with reaction game. As the caller, we have the weaker range on pretty much any board. Why is that the case? We do 4-bet top range. Villain does have aces, kings, queens. We are 4-betting our best hands. Those are the hands that are missing. The person with the more top hands, the more over pairs, is the stronger range overall, which means this is the guy who should do the majority of the betting. That leads to point number 2. It is absolutely Villain's job to build his betting strategy. Everything we can do is reacting. This is why we call it reaction game. The majority of hands just want to do some calling and see more cards, playing in position, making use of our position, right? Not raising too much. Raising kills our positional advantage. And for that, what we need is absolutely range awareness, that we know our range, that we know where we are at in our range, that we know Villain's range if possible. And just as easy as it sounds, odds and outs. We need to react to Villain's sizing. It's difference whether he bets 20%, 33, 50, 75, or he just overjams the flop. And outs. Outs, not just knowing that having a flush draw means we have probably 9 outs to hit a flush in the next card, and that this should be about 18%. That's not what I'm talking about, but that we understand, okay, which hands are good against Villain's value hands, right? How good is a bottom pair? How good is a pocket pair? How many outs do we have? If we improve, is that a good value bet? Do we improve often to a second best hand? Are we improving to a hand that is just like beating Villain's value jams? Stuff like that. All right, so that being said, so far, I wrote down some decision points that if we are stuck in that position, then I have certain things that I personally think about to have like better awareness in every single spot, right? And my main flop thought process is just about not thinking about my hand, but like, yeah, am I raising the flop overall, yes or no? If no is the answer that I use personally very, very often to simplify, then I know exactly my range for the turn and can go from there. Just means I let Villain realize all his equity, which obviously has a downside, but makes it very, very easy for me. And then call is the only option. The only decision after making that decision that I might play without a raising range, then is that I have one border, which is the call fold decision. And this is usually not a tough one. Some hands are like about 0 EV or mixed or whatever, and maybe I can find some exploitative reasons to go either way. And if not, it actually doesn't matter too much what we do with those hands. That's about it for the flop. And then we call or we fold. On the turn, it gets a little more dicey. Usually the turn is where people start to size up. Sometimes that happens on the flop already, like especially lower boards where people put out big bets to pressure you. This is the moment where I'm actually talking about bluff catching. And this is now where we need to understand equity. Equity against Villain's betting range, against both his bluffs and his value. The river, things turn around a little, and we should think about a little about blockers, right? Which hands are good, which hands are bad. One thing that I use a lot and that helped me to not call off too often is just try to think of Villain's bluffs. If you can't find them, well, then there won't be many. Example number 1. Now here, I want to go through the decision points once, at least in that example. Again, double check the decision points that I wrote down. There are a couple more maybe, but this flop, I want to talk about raising range, yes or no. And then we obviously have that question, which hands are we calling, which are we folding? On the turn, we'll talk about the ranking of our bluff catchers. And on the river, again, a ranking of our bluff catchers, but now we are not talking about equity. There is no equity anymore on the river, but we talk about blockers. So here, very easy. Example 1, small blind versus button, a 3-bet pot, king, 6, deuce, rainbow, and Villain decides to bet third pot. If you put that in GTO Wizard, there's some 20%ing, some third pot, maybe some half pot as well. I think third pot was the highest frequency bet size, and this is our reaction. Bottom right, you can see the reaction. You see that, this is what I mean here, what I wrote down here is flop, no raising range necessary. And the only thing is, what's the strongest hand we are folding? So like we see ace queen is a call, ace jack is a fold. Okay. The ace 10, ace 9 will be depending on the backdoor flush draws, as are the ace 5, ace 4 suited. It's a cheap price. We see a turn. Let's see what Villain does. We still have positional advantage. And everything else, everything we are folding is like Jack 9, 10, 9, 10, 8, 9, 8. That obviously didn't connect with that board at all. And maybe some pocket sevens. So very easy, that flop on a board like that, right? Very, very tough to make a mistake here. We see what comes next. We sit there in position. I really have that image, like we lean back here. Let villain do the job. We stay in here when we connect, have a cheap price. We'll see what's going on. So we will play a turn. Now this is the moment that typically people polarize. We get that queen of hearts on the turn. So we have a flush draw out there now. We have straight draws going on. Gut shots, all the pairs are kind of shit. And yeah, villain decides to bet 50, 72, 75%. It's a mix here in that spot. It's important to understand the ranking of our bluff catchers. I named it. Right. So here what I made is a list from best bluff catcher to worst bluff catcher. And I think everything like the weak king for me starts being a bluff catcher because villain is not really double barreling big with something like ace queen. So this is the point where we only beat bluffs. Obviously a king is great because it blocks the main value that villain might have, right? If we have a king, he has less ace king, less king queen, and so on. So obviously there's no chance we fold a king, and a king has very, 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 very decent EV here. Next best bluff catcher is a queen. Right? A queen has very, very solid equity against any bluff because villain needs to hit a straight or an ace. Right? If villain has something like Jack 10, hitting a Jack or a 10 doesn't beat us. If villain has something like 7, 8 of hearts, a 7 or an 8 doesn't beat us. If villain has something like ace 5, well, it's just the ace that beats us if he gets there. So queen is pretty strong. A 6x is actually the next best bluff catcher. And this is important once we talk about equity here. Obviously, something like jacks, 10s, 9s is better than a 6. We can see it here, like something like pocket jacks have an EV of 0.05. Something like 7-6 suited, this doesn't contain any flush draws, has an EV of 3.47. Right? The reason is just the outs that we are having. 5 outs, that is 10% of the time, we're improving to 2 pair or trips, which means we beat aces, we beat ace king. So this here is the ranking, very, very important. Understanding just the quality of bluff catchers guarding equity. Okay, cool. Let's go to a river then. Wet one, here we go, right? I didn't go that wet, but I had the flush going there to talk about blockers. So now I got more specific. You can see that in that list already. And what happens is small blind bets third pot flop. Obviously, he bets 50% on the turn and he jams the river. And we need to now understand whether we call super light pocket 8s on the turn, or pocket jacks on the turn, or ace queen with or without a heart, a king with or without a heart. We need to evaluate how good our hand is. When we beat bluffs, we lose to value. This is what it is. You should know when you make a bluff catch, which hand you hope for villain to have. If you don't have any idea which hands he could have, well, then you probably are making a very bad bluff catch. Ace, jack, ace 10 with the ace of hearts, or at least the jack of hearts or 10 of hearts, are obviously the highest frequency bluffs in villain's spots. So everyone that we think can find those bluffs, we need to do some bluff catching against. Ace X, king of hearts, is actually the better catcher than ace of hearts, king. People think blocking the nut flush, but you are also blocking the nut bluffs, right? So like something with the ace of hearts is not necessarily bad, but it's kind of irrelevant, right? The king of hearts is a beautiful one. With the king of hearts, you're only blocking value hands. No chance you block a bluff with the king of hearts. So ace X, king of hearts is the best one. Okay, let's switch over to action game. Since we explained the reaction game already, action game is just the opposite. It's every time villain is not really going for his betting, right? He checks to us. This has mainly 2 reasons. A, the board smashes us. Sometimes this can be the case, especially when we are deeper maybe as well. And then we should target all that shit with small bets. Right? Then villain has pure give-ups because we have the stronger range all of a sudden, or the stronger nut part. Option B is, it is his board, but still he decides to check and not range bet or anything. Then his range is usually centered around medium strong value, that he decides to, he doesn't need to deny equity, but he can check. Like, for example, ace king 4, he can check his king queen, a weak ace, something like that. This is something we want to target with big bets to put pressure on those. Go all the way or do nothing. This is what it's about here. These are the 2 options. We need to figure them out. And obviously there's lots of mixed spots in between where everything is possible, but understanding these are the 2 main reasons we're looking for to find bet sizings and betting frequencies is very important, and just tells you in most spots what the right thing should be. All right. What are the decision points in the action game? On the flop and on the turn, this is made on purpose. I wrote down the same thing. What are we attacking? Once you know that, you know exactly what you should do. So here I wrote it down as a general rule that works every time we do bet sizings. Actually, I think I wrote that down like 10 times already in the coachings. Focus on targeting the weakest hand category villain has that has relevant equity against our value hands. Jack 10 on 4, 5, 6 has relevant equity against a big chunk of our value hands. Absolutely. Let's get 2 examples, right? This is just all we need to know. And this works for the turn as well. Once we're just putting the first bet in, right? It's like the first bet against a check is usually where villain has give ups. Some of them have equity. We try to attack that. If there are no equity hands that are quickly giving up, we start polarizing, have our value hands and add bluffs, and can be value or bluff heavy. This is when we use big sizings. Example 1, this one, 7, 6, 5. Small blind checks to us on the button. We attack, I said it here, non-backdoor flush draw broadways. You see how much the 20% sizing is preferred on the right side. And on the bottom left, I showed you villain's folding range. Very important here. Again, we focus on the offsuit part. So this is why I said non-backdoor flush draw broadways. All the offsuit hands don't have a backdoor flush draw. So here the 20% to get all those snap folds is very beautiful. Let's get another board out. Small blind checks to us on the button on ace king 5 with a flush draw. And now we can see again what our reaction is. On the right side, this is what we should do. And here, again, we are not attacking villain's 10-8 of clubs. We don't care about 10-8 of clubs. It doesn't have any value in that spot. So we attack medium strong value, and therefore we need a medium sizing directional in. That's like 33 is actually enough to go directional in, but like 12.5 is what we slightly prefer with most of our ace kings, ace queens, maybe even ace jack. We just don't have too many value hands, pocket fives. So yeah, and then we see on the bottom left again, this is villain's folding or continuing range. The blue side, exactly what you said before. He hates his life already with king jack, pocket queens, pocket jacks, pocket tens. They will navigate a little around hearts. We fold out something like pocket eights, pocket sevens. Yeah, this is a good thing. This is why we should bluff a lot with like 5, 6, 4, 5 type of hands, pocket fours, pocket threes, stuff like that. Example number 3, let's talk about a turn. So let's say under the gun versus big blind, villain c-bets on king, queen, deuce. Big blind versus early position. So this is very, very tight and different ranges. He checks to us on the turn. And here it's important to not use any small sizings, right? So here, what is villain doing here? Like he either has a give up that does not have relevant equity. What can villain have that he's giving up here with? Ace 8 of spades, of clubs, 6, 7 of diamonds. Like, yeah, we don't need to attack them. So what else might he have? He's coming from the big blind, so he doesn't have 10s, 9s, 8s, and so on. So actually what we are doing here is targeting queen X right away. No, we don't care about that shit. I didn't put in the folding range here. So it's really ace, queen, and queen jack. They were all pretty much indifferent. Or the big blind specials like a queen 4 suited that they should have. Very important is that we need to think about villain's actual range, not a GTO wizard range. So if we want to attack villain's give ups, for example, when he 3-bets from the big blind, against some people we are talking about the ace 8 offsuits and the king 4 suiteds in the world. Against some people we are just attacking ace king and ace king only. People are usually too strong. I say that every single time. It stays like that because it's still, this is how amateurs play. So if we're playing lower stakes, 3-bets from the big blind are just strong hands. And that tells us, okay, like they won't have any c-bets and then give ups as well. So hand in hand, that kind of thing goes with overfold versus 2 strong ranges. Again, what is important is, can you imagine villain's bluff? If you think about calling a bluff, you want to have an image of the hand you want to see in your head. Do you think he can overbluff by any chance? Often the answer is no. And then when we come to action game, it's really important. Lots of people have face up medium showdown value. This is, yeah, how you can attack that. Lower frequency, but big sizings. Choose your hands and attack them, or exploitatively hammer on them when you know it's just this hand category they are having. And even better when you know which point they are folding those. And then there's another, like I call it the team check means give up. So last note here, team check is give up. You can't go too crazy with small sizings. I'm using like 7% bets personally in 4-bet pots, for example, where like you can tickle them. Like, you know, they are full of shit. They're giving up. You can try whether it's 20%, 15%, 12%, whatever you think you get any more money, or you can just hurt them the most, or still have the best risk reward if they end up check raising at some point. You have additional information on later streets, so you can float lighter actually. Right? You know, your river bluffs will be better because they are not trapping and so on. So this is another idea here that we can put in. Key takeaways, again, focus on villain's actual range. This is now the exploitative thing. Don't play GTO Wizard when you're playing NL5. Understand GTO Wizard, yes, consciously overfold in the right spots, consciously overbluff in the right spots, consciously hammer on them in the right spots. In the reaction game, focus on equity versus value hands, right? A gut shot might be better than a pocket pair, even though you have no showdown value. This is very, very important. You play mainly call only, you carry things to the river, and then there is a decision. You want to make strong hands there. And then know the bluffs they should have. This is really the strongest. If you can't imagine the bluffs villains have, then fold. Big game changer. And then action game, the golden rule, I put it here, use the opposite bet size that villains should use. And yeah, that will help you. And just like know what you're attacking. Once you know what you're attacking, you won't mess up. Cool. See you for the next one.